My fiancé lied about having kids, and now I'm rethinking marriage. I thought I knew everything about my fiancé. We had been together for over 2 years, and I thought I knew what kind of life we were going to build together. But everything changed when I found out the truth about his past, something he had kept hidden from me. Turns out, he had lied about something huge, something that, if I'd known, might have changed everything. I don't know what to do now, but what I do know is that I'm questioning everything about our future together. Here's how it all went down. It all started out so perfect, or at least that's what I thought. My fiancé Mark and I had been dating for 2 years before getting engaged, and in those 2 years, everything seemed ideal. We had the same values, the same goals, and we both wanted the same things in life. He was charming, funny, kind, and very family-oriented. We talked about our future together, how many kids we wanted, the kind of house we'd have, and even where we might retire. It was always just us, dreaming about the life ahead. But things started to feel a little off when we had a conversation about kids. I had always known that Mark came from a big family, and he'd often tell stories about his nieces and nephews. He loved kids, and it seemed like he wanted to have a family of his own. We talked about it more seriously when we got engaged, and he even mentioned that he wanted to start trying for a baby within the first couple of years of marriage. One night, we were having a quiet dinner at home, talking about our wedding plans and our future. It was during one of these casual conversations that I casually mentioned something about his kids from his previous marriage. I had assumed he had children because of some comments he made about co-parenting and things like that. He had always been so open about his past relationships, so it seemed like a normal question. But his face froze when I brought it up. There was a long pause, an awkward silence that made me feel uneasy. "What do you mean, my kids?" Mark asked, his voice stiff. I thought I might have misheard him or misunderstood something, but I repeated the question. "I just thought you had kids from your first marriage. I know you've talked about them a lot." Mark's expression went from confusion to a quick flash of something else, something I couldn't quite read. He quickly looked away, and I could tell something was off. It felt like the air between us shifted, but I didn't understand why. "Well, about that," he started, his voice quieter than usual. "I never had kids with my ex-wife. We talked about it, but it never happened." I sat there in complete disbelief. I was so sure that I had heard him mention children before. We'd even discussed the idea of blending families. My mind raced, trying to make sense of everything he had said over the past few months. I realized that not only had he lied to me about having children, but he had also been feeding me a false narrative about his past that had influenced how I saw our future together. I didn't know what to say. The weight of his words hit me hard. Why had he lied to me? What else had he been hiding? After the conversation, I was in shock. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, trying to process what had just happened. I had always been open with Mark about my past, my family, and my life. So why had he kept something like this from me? Finally, I spoke up, my voice trembling with confusion. "Mark, why didn't you tell me? Why lie about having kids? I thought you were open with me about everything." Mark's face tightened, and he ran a hand through his hair, looking almost ashamed. He stood up and started pacing, clearly trying to figure out what to say. I could feel the tension in the air, and it made me even more anxious. It felt like everything I thought I knew about him was unraveling right before my eyes. "I didn't lie," he said finally, turning to face me. "It's complicated. I didn't want to bring it up because I didn't think it mattered. I didn't think it was something you'd need to know." I stared at him, not understanding. How could it not matter? We've been talking about starting a family together, and you've been planning our future based on something that isn't even true. Why wouldn't you tell me? He sat back down across from me, his hands resting in his lap. "I didn't want you to judge me for it. My past with my ex-wife was complicated. We wanted kids, but it never happened. I didn't want you to think I was some kind of failure or that it would be a problem for us in the future." I was floored. His explanation didn't make any sense to me. I understood not wanting to dwell on painful aspects of your past, but to completely fabricate something like that? To build an entire part of your history on a lie? It felt like a betrayal. "So you lied to me because you thought I'd judge you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You thought that me, of all people, would care about your past? I love you, Mark, but I need the truth. All of it." He looked down, guilt evident on his face. I know. I should have told you. But I was scared. I was scared you'd think I couldn't give you the family you wanted. At that moment, everything clicked into place. This wasn't just about a lie, it was about insecurity. Mark had always seemed so confident, but now I saw that underneath, he was scared. Scared of failing. Scared of not being good enough. Mark, I said softly, I don't care about your past. I care about you. But we can't build a life together based on lies. You have to be honest with me, even when it's hard. There was a long silence as he nodded, his face drawn with regret. I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to get this far. I've been terrified of disappointing you. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. I knew he was apologetic, but the truth was, it hurt. I felt betrayed, and I didn't know if I could just brush this off. It wasn't just about the lie, it was about trust. And right now, that trust was shattered. For the next few days, I could hardly look at Mark. The weight of his lie lingered in the air between us, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been irreparably broken. I had trusted him completely, and now I was left questioning everything about our relationship. If he could lie about something so significant, what else had he been hiding? It wasn't that I was angry with him, I was disappointed. I had never expected perfection from Mark, but I had hoped for honesty. And instead, I had been fed a story that turned out to be completely fabricated. Mark, on the other hand, seemed to retreat into himself. He apologized over and over again, but each time he did, it felt less meaningful. It was almost as if he thought apologizing would magically fix things, but I needed more than that. I needed transparency and real understanding. One evening, a few days after the confrontation, Mark sat down next to me on the couch, his hands nervously fidgeting with the sleeve of his shirt. I know I can't undo what I did, he began quietly, but I want you to know that I'm committed to being better. I understand now how much I hurt you. I glanced over at him, unsure how to respond. Part of me wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that he was genuinely sorry, but another part of me couldn't ignore the feeling that this was more about his own guilt than about fixing what was broken between us. I just don't know if I can get past this, I admitted, my voice trembling. It's not just about the lie, it's about how it's made me question everything about us. How do I even know you'll be honest with me in the future? Mark reached for my hand, his touch gentle but uncertain. I understand that, and I know I've lost your trust, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to rebuild it. I want us to have a future together, and I know that can't happen if I don't earn your trust back. His words sounded sincere, but I wasn't sure they were enough. Trust wasn't something that could be repaired overnight. And every time I thought about starting over, I couldn't shake the feeling that something vital had been lost. We spent the next few days in limbo, neither of us willing to walk away, but also neither of us sure of how to move forward. The thought of getting married, of committing to a life with someone who had been dishonest about something so important, felt wrong. I couldn't stop thinking about the future, about how I'd feel every time we discussed children or our plans together. What if the lies continued? What if this wasn't the only secret Mark was keeping from me? I knew I had to make a decision, but the weight of it all made me hesitate. I didn't want to make the wrong choice, but I also couldn't ignore the gut feeling that this relationship had been irrevocably changed. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty. Mark and I didn't have many conversations beyond the occasional apology or attempt to smooth things over. It felt like we were walking on eggshells, afraid to stir up any more hurt, but not truly addressing the core of the issue. We would sit next to each other, but it wasn't the same anymore. The easy, carefree conversations we had before seemed impossible now. I started thinking about everything, about our relationship, about the lies, and about my future. I thought back to when we first met, to how easy it had been to fall for him. He was so charming, so attentive. But now I realized that all of that might have been a carefully crafted facade. Maybe I had been blinded by the idea of us, of what I thought we could be, and not seeing the red flags. One evening, I decided I needed some space. I told Mark I was going to spend the night at a friend's house to clear my head. He was visibly upset, but I knew it was the only way I could think clearly. I needed to be away from him to make the decision I was dreading. As I sat at my friend Sarah's house, I poured my heart out to her. I don't know what to do, Sarah. I love him, but I feel like I've lost trust in him. I keep wondering, if he lied about this, what else is he hiding? Sarah listened carefully, her eyes sympathetic. You know, It's normal to question everything after something like this. But you also have to think about whether you can move forward. Do you think you can ever trust him again? I didn't answer right away. Could I trust him? Could I ever go back to the way things were? Or would I always be second-guessing every word that came out of his mouth? I realized that this wasn't just about Mark's mistake. It was about how it had fundamentally changed my perception of him and of our future. I spent a sleepless night at Sarah's, thinking about everything. When I woke up the next morning, I knew what I had to do. It wasn't about whether I loved him. It was about whether I could trust him with my future, and at that moment, I wasn't sure I could. The decision to finally talk to Mark was long overdue. I knew I couldn't keep avoiding him, especially when the only way forward was through a difficult conversation. As much as I wanted to run away from the pain, I also realized that I needed closure, whether that meant staying in the relationship or ending it. I returned home to find Mark sitting on the couch, his eyes immediately meeting mine. He had clearly been waiting for me, and I could tell he was nervous. We hadn't spoken much since I left, and his silence spoke volumes. "I think we need to talk," I said, my voice steady, even though my insides were a mess. Mark stood up quickly, his expression shifting from nervousness to concern. "I know, I'm sorry for everything, and I've been thinking about this nonstop since we last spoke." I nodded, trying to steady my nerves. "Mark, I've been doing a lot of thinking too. I love you, I really do. But the truth is, I don't know if I can trust you anymore." His face faltered for a moment, but he quickly masked it with an attempt to be understanding. "I get it. You're hurt, and I understand why. But please know that I never meant to hurt you. I'm not perfect, but I want to be better. I want to prove to you that you can trust me." I sat down across from him, the weight of the situation hanging heavy in the air. "I need to know that this isn't just about you trying to fix things for yourself. I need to know that you're not hiding anything else from me, that you can be completely open with me from now on." Mark nodded earnestly. "I swear there's nothing else. I was scared to tell you the truth about the past. But I see now that not telling you only made everything worse. I want to be the person you thought I was, and I know I have a long way to go." His words were heartfelt, but I still wasn't sure. The trust I once had in him had been shattered, and while he seemed genuinely remorseful, I had no guarantee that the future wouldn't bring more surprises. Surprises I wasn't ready to face. "I'm not asking for perfection, Mark," I said quietly. "I'm asking for honesty. I don't want to spend my life second-guessing everything you say, or wondering what else you're hiding. I need to know that I can trust you again." Mark took a deep breath, and for the first time, I saw the vulnerability in his eyes. "I can't change what happened, but I promise you that I will do everything in my power to rebuild your trust. If you're willing to give me a chance, I'll spend every day showing you that you made the right choice." I was quiet for a long moment, trying to digest everything he'd said. I wanted to believe him, but the truth was, I was scared. Scared that I'd make the wrong decision, scared that I'd let myself down by not listening to my gut. "I don't know if I'm ready for that yet," I said softly. "But I'm willing to give it a shot. I just need time." Mark nodded, relief flooding his face. "I understand. I'll do whatever it takes, and I'll give you all the time you need." The next few weeks were an emotional roller coaster. I was trying to move forward, trying to heal, but I couldn't shake the uncertainty that had settled in my mind. I spent more time focusing on myself, trying to figure out what I truly wanted. Mark had made it clear that he was sorry and wanted to rebuild my trust, but I still wasn't sure if I could fully let go of what had happened. It wasn't easy. There were moments when I thought I could forgive him, when I wanted to believe that things would go back to normal. But then, there were other moments when I was reminded of the lie, the nagging feeling that he hadn't been truthful about everything. And I was constantly wondering what other secrets he was holding on to. I started going to therapy to help process everything. Talking to a professional about my feelings and confusion made a huge difference. They helped me understand that what I was going through was normal, feeling conflicted, feeling scared, and feeling unsure about the future. It didn't make the pain go away, but it gave me the tools to deal with it. Mark respected my need for space and time, which was something I appreciated. He continued to be supportive, always there when I needed him, but never pushing me to make a decision before I was ready. His patience was a good sign, but I still wasn't sure if I could move forward with him. One day, after a particularly difficult therapy session, I was sitting alone in the park, just trying to clear my mind. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a message from Mark. I'm thinking about you. I just want you to know that no matter what happens, I love you and I'm grateful for everything we've shared." Reading those words brought a lump to my throat. Part of me wanted to text him back and tell him I was ready to try again, that I could see a future with him. But another part of me wasn't sure if I was being honest with myself or just afraid of losing him. I decided to take the rest of the day for myself. I turned off my phone and walked around, letting the cool air clear my mind. There was something comforting about being alone with my thoughts, without anyone else's expectations pressing down on me. I needed to be sure about my next steps. I couldn't let guilt or fear dictate my decision. I had to make it for me. When I got home that evening, Mark was sitting on the couch waiting for me. His face softened when he saw me. "How was your day?" he asked gently. I could tell he was trying to gauge where I was emotionally, and I appreciated that. He wasn't pushing me for an answer. I took a deep breath, sitting down next to him. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about what happened." Mark nodded, not saying anything, just waiting for me to speak. "I don't know what's going to happen," I said quietly. "I still love you, but I can't ignore the fact that this whole situation has shaken me. I can't keep going like everything is fine when I still don't know if I can trust you." "I understand," he replied softly, "and I don't expect you to just forgive me, but I'm willing to prove to you every single day that I can be the person you thought I was." His words were reassuring, but the decision still weighed heavily on my heart. Could I truly rebuild the trust that had been shattered? Could I move forward with him knowing that a lie had once poisoned our relationship? A few days passed, and I still hadn't come to any conclusion. I felt like I was stuck in a loop, going over the same thoughts again and again, trying to find clarity in a situation that felt so uncertain. Mark and I were still in the same house, still talking, but the air between us wasn't the same. I loved him, but every time I looked at him, I couldn't stop thinking about the lie. It was like an invisible wall that had been built up between us, one that neither of us knew how to tear down. Then came the moment that changed everything. One evening, as I was cleaning up after dinner, I noticed something unusual on the counter, a small, folded piece of paper that had been tucked under the bills. I picked it up, unfolded it, and my heart skipped a beat when I realized what it was: an old letter from Mark's ex-wife. I didn't mean to pry, but the timing felt too coincidental. The letter was from years ago, before Mark and I even met. It was full of sentimental words, reminiscing about their time together, and in it, she mentioned their plans to start a family. She even referenced a miscarriage they had experienced, a part of Mark's life that he had never mentioned. The discovery hit me harder than I expected. There it was, the thing Mark hadn't told me. He had been deeply affected by that loss, and it seemed like it still lingered in his life. It wasn't the lie about having kids that hurt me anymore. It was the realization that Mark had never really processed that pain, that he had hidden it from me. I sat down on the couch, staring at the letter in my hands. I wasn't angry anymore, just confused. Mark had kept something so personal from me, not because of a lie about his past, but because of something he had never learned to talk about. The things he had avoided in our relationship were the things he had never truly worked through on his own. Maybe it wasn't about me, not entirely. It was about his past, the trauma he had never dealt with. When Mark came in from the kitchen, he saw the letter in my hands. His face immediately fell, and I could tell that he knew what I had found. The guilt on his face was palpable. "I never meant for you to find that," he said quietly, walking over to me. I looked up at him, my emotions conflicted. "Why didn't you tell me about this, Mark?" "I would have understood. We could have talked about it." He sat down beside me, his eyes downcast. "I didn't want to burden you with it. I didn't think it was something that needed to be brought up. But it's a part of who you are," I said, my voice soft. "And I want to understand that part of you. I can't be in a relationship where I'm kept in the dark about things that matter." Mark reached out and gently took my hand, his voice breaking as he spoke. "I'm sorry. I've always tried to protect you from my past, but now I see how wrong that was. I've hurt you by not letting you in, by not trusting you with everything." I looked at him for a long time, letting his words sink in. In that moment, I realized that the problem wasn't just the lie. It was the wall he had built around his past, and the way he kept it hidden from me. "I can't promise that everything will be okay right away," I said, my voice shaky but resolute. "But I'm willing to try if you are. I need you to be open with me all the time, not just about your past, but about who you are now. I can't keep pretending that everything is fine if you're still hiding pieces of yourself." Mark nodded, his eyes full of regret. "I understand. I'll do whatever it takes to be open with you. I'm ready to face everything and work through it together." It wasn't an instant fix. Trust isn't something that can be rebuilt overnight. But hearing him admit his vulnerability, seeing him finally open up about something so important, made me realize that we weren't beyond repair. We had work to do, but I wasn't ready to give up on us just yet. The road to rebuilding trust wasn't easy, but it was necessary. After that conversation, things between Mark and I started to shift. He had finally opened up about his past, and although I couldn't erase the past, I started to see him in a new light. There was a lot we had to work through, and it wasn't just about me trusting him. It was about him learning to trust himself and me too. Mark started taking small steps to show me that he was serious about our future. He was more open about his feelings and fears, especially when it came to discussing his past. We started having deeper conversations than we ever had before, even about topics I had been too afraid to bring up. It was uncomfortable at first, but it was also freeing. I could feel the walls between us starting to come down. We went to couples therapy to work through everything. Mark was hesitant at first, but he agreed to go because he knew it was the only way to truly rebuild what we had lost. Therapy gave us a safe space to address our issues without the pressure of pretending everything was okay. We talked about our fears, our insecurities, and how to move forward together. The process was slow, and there were days when it felt like we were getting nowhere, but each day was a step forward. I started to feel a glimmer of hope that we could find our way back to each other, even if it wasn't going to be the same as before. One evening after therapy, we went out for dinner. Mark was quieter than usual, and I could tell he was reflecting on everything we had talked about. I didn't push him to say anything, but after a few minutes of silence, he spoke up. "I know it's going to take time, and I understand that," he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "But I need you to know that I'm fully committed to making this work. I'll keep showing you that I'm someone you can trust, and I'll never hide anything from you again." I looked at him, feeling a mixture of relief and cautious optimism. "It's going to take time," I said, "but I'm willing to give it that time. I just need to see that this isn't just about saving face. It's about us, truly fixing things." "I know," Mark replied, "and I'm not asking you to forgive me overnight. I just want to prove to you that I'm worth it." It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but it felt like a beginning. We both knew that there were still obstacles ahead, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like we could face them together. There was no magic fix, no easy solution, but we had something real, the desire to rebuild and the willingness to put in the work. The days turned into weeks, and the work we were putting into rebuilding our relationship started to show. Mark was making an effort, more than he ever had before. He would leave small notes for me around the house, reminding me that he was thinking of me. He'd initiate conversations about our future, asking how I envisioned things, making sure we were on the same page about what we both wanted. Still, there were moments when doubts crept in. Every now and then, I'd catch myself questioning whether this was just a temporary change, a moment of self-reflection for Mark that might fade over time. What if the person he had shown me wasn't the real Mark? What if he was just trying to fix things because he was afraid of losing me? But there were also moments that reassured me. When he spoke about his past with more honesty and less defensiveness, when he showed vulnerability instead of anger or shame, I could see that this was the real work. I wasn't sure where it would lead, but I could feel that we were trying to build something stronger than we had before. One night, as we were having dinner, Mark suddenly asked, "Do you think we'll be able to fully move past this, the lies and everything that happened?" The question caught me off guard. I had been thinking about it too, but I hadn't voiced it yet. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I think we're in a better place than we were a month ago. I think we're both trying, but trust is something that has to be rebuilt slowly. It doesn't happen just because we want it to." Mark nodded thoughtfully. "I get that, and I'm willing to take as long as it takes. I don't expect you to forget what happened, but I do want you to know that I'm committed to being honest and transparent from now on. I want us to build something real." His words gave me a sense of relief, but there was still so much I didn't know. Would I ever feel completely secure again? Would the fear of being hurt again always be lurking in the background? Part of me wondered if the scar would always remain. But another part of me understood that this was the process of healing. We were both learning how to navigate the messiness of life, and we were doing it together. Slowly but surely, I began to let go of some of the fears that had been holding me back. There were still challenges ahead, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. It wasn't going to be easy, and I wasn't naive enough to think that the road ahead would be smooth, but I could see that we were taking the necessary steps, one at a time. Months passed, and with each day I felt the distance between us shrink. Mark's efforts to rebuild my trust didn't go unnoticed, and I started to realize that he was not just trying to win me back. He was trying to become a better version of himself for both of us. We went on weekend trips, had more deep conversations, and spent countless hours talking about our hopes, fears, and plans for the future. Slowly, the old fears began to fade, and a new kind of connection blossomed between us. But trust isn't something you can just flick a switch on. There were still days when I caught myself worrying, wondering if Mark had truly changed, or if he was just playing the role of someone who had learned his lesson. Every once in a while, I would catch a glimpse of the old Mark, the guarded, secretive one who kept parts of himself hidden. But each time, I reminded myself of the work we had put in, the conversations, the effort. We had gone through a real crisis, but it had forced us to face our issues head on. It wasn't easy, and I was still unsure at times whether we'd fully overcome it, but I felt like we were building a better foundation, layer by layer. One evening, Mark and I were sitting on the couch after a quiet dinner, and he turned to me with a serious look in his eyes. "I know we've been through a lot," he said, his voice soft but firm. "And I know that I've made mistakes, but I'm asking you to keep believing in us. I want to keep working on this, on us." I could see how much he meant it. The man sitting in front of me was no longer the person who had hidden parts of his life from me. He was someone who had made mistakes, but also someone who was trying to make things right. "I'm willing to try," I said quietly, "but I need you to understand that trust is something that takes time. It's not just about saying the right words. It's about showing me every day that I can rely on you." Mark nodded, his expression sincere. "I'll show you. Every day I'll show you." It was then that I realized that this relationship, like any other, would require constant effort. There were no shortcuts, no quick fixes, but we had made progress. There was still a long road ahead, but I was no longer terrified of the unknown. I had learned to trust myself through all of this. I had learned to stand up for what I needed, and I had learned that it was okay to ask for time, space, and honesty in a relationship. We weren't perfect, and I didn't expect us to be. But we were working towards something real, and that was enough for me, for now. As I look back on everything that happened, I've realized how important it is to trust not just your partner, but yourself in situations like this. When I found out about Mark's lie, I felt lost. I didn't know if I could ever trust him again. But it wasn't just about him, it was about me too. I had to ask myself if I was willing to put in the effort to rebuild that trust, and if I was willing to fight for the relationship I believed in. It hasn't been easy. We've had to confront uncomfortable truths, make difficult decisions, and face the reality that relationships aren't always perfect, but they are worth fighting for if both people are committed. Have you ever been in a situation where trust was broken? How did you handle it? Do you believe relationships can truly heal after something like that? Or is it something that can never be the same? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. And if you found this story helpful or relatable, please like, share, and subscribe. Relationships are hard, but we can always learn from each other's experiences. Let's keep the conversation going and support one another.